Lend me your ears.
This nation will rise up.
Welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. Guys, welcome back to the Elemental Health Podcast. I'm Nick Quinton, your host. It's great to be back on with you guys today, and I hope that you very much enjoy this session. So we have got Jamie Webb with us today, and it's really exciting to have this conversation with him. And it's really interesting that the evolution of the conversation and where we go with it. So we start off talking about kind of his story and his background and how he got into sports therapy and soft tissue work, and how that really was the door that opened into the whole world of health and wellness and well-being for him, and his journey through that. And I think the key takeaways, the bits that we go really in depth into that sort of blew my mind and made me sort of rethink how I think about different things is how deep we go on stress and how stress affects the body and how stress manifests within the physical body. Because we always talk about stress as being a killer, and no doubt my time in clinical practice has taught me that absolutely stress is the biggest killer out there in today's Western society. It's that's that chronic stress takes its toll on all our organs. But it's really interesting to hear Jamie's view, because obviously he's day in day out treating people hands-on, and just how that manifests within the body. And I find that really fascinating, that what different stresses manifest with different people in different areas of the body, and that can be physically felt when it's been manually manipulated by someone like Jenny, someone really experienced who knows what they're doing. They can really delve into that and the connection with the mind and the body, and how he's able to evoke these really emotional experiences. Guys, it's an awesome episode. I really hope you enjoy it. Without further ado, please welcome Jamie Webb. Jamie Webb, welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. The audience has heard a little bit about you on the kind of the intro that I put in beforehand. Yeah, I want to dive a bit more into your background and your journey and your story, and understand how you're helping people now. Yeah, and then I'm sure the conversation will unfold, and we'll dive into some areas to really give people a feel of your area of expertise and how they can apply that to their own life. I think that's important as well. Cool. So Jamie, help us to understand how you found yourself kind of a very experienced physical therapist, and kind of exploring lots of new ways, which we'll get into. How do you get into this?
Firstly, I did a degree in IT, right. So that's how it all started. I, as most people do in their life, kind of meander their way through it as a teenager, not really knowing or having a clue what they want to do with their life. And I just didn't really, I guess followed my nose into something I was good at. It happened to be, computer programming at the time. Did an IT degree, and found myself in an IT job in Swindon, and found myself quite depressed, quite honestly, as many people do with IT jobs in Swindon. Yeah. And so in order to, I guess, cope with that, I knew my life wasn't on the path that I wanted it to be on, but I didn't know what I actually wanted it to be on. A quarter-life crisis, as I like to call it at the time.
I can relate.
Yeah.
It's funny. I also did an IT degree along with sort of map making, cartography space, but and found myself in IT, not loving it, not finding a passion for it, which was really difficult for me, actually.
Yeah, I think when I was there, I was okay at it. I wasn't great at it. The money was good. Social life in Swindon was actually pretty good at the time. But the guys I was working with, they'd go home and they'd sit in front of an IT textbook in the evening and play on their computers, and I'm like, that's not really my bag. So to help me cope, with the emotions I was struggling with at the time, I've always been very sporty, and always heavily exercise based. Swimming is my main thing. Competitive swimmer. Only just really well. I've hung up my trunks a few times, but hung them up again recently with the arrival of my second daughter. So I started doing football as well, and squash, and training in the gym, do some weight training and running as well. And I worked out, I think I was doing in excess of 20 hours a week exercise. as well as a night, well, theoretically 9 to 5, sometimes 9 to 6, sometimes 9 to 7 IT job. I was exercising in my lunchtime, exercising in the evenings. I just needed that endorphin hit, to keep me going. I now know. Obviously, I didn't realise that at the time. And then, unsurprisingly, my body started breaking. Even at the age of 25, when you do that kind of level of exercise, particularly, psychologically not being particularly happy as well. I think that's important to note as well. I know that now.
Yep.
Didn't know that back then. And just went for some physio for a few things. First bits of physio, because it was covered on my work insurance at the time, it was the old-fashioned ultrasound, electrotherapy, and I thought, this is rubbish. Doesn't really do anything. But it was all free, so I turned up like a good boy, tried to do the exercises. It didn't really make much difference to my condition. And then maybe a couple of years after that, again, next injury along was a knee problem. A very inspirational physiotherapist came along and told me that my knee problem was because of my glutes. And at that point, my eyes just kind of lit up. I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And he didn't really kind of explain it in any more detail, but it just kind of sparked a flame, and that flame is still kind of burning very brightly to this day. So from there, that kind of just planted the seed, as I say, and I then had an idea that that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't really have the bottle to do it at the time, if truth be told. There was some redundancies going around in the company I was working for in Swindon, and they were asking for volunteers, and I was like, oh, shall I do it, shall I not do it? And I didn't do it in the end, but thankfully I got kicked out anyway. So
moves in mysterious ways.
Yeah. So it was a really interesting time, because I desperately wanted to get out of there, but actually when I was booted out, it was a hit to the ego, that's for sure. But it really, like I say, gave me a kick up the backside that I needed. So I had a payoff. It wasn't a massive payoff, but it was enough to pay for a year-long course for a diploma in sports therapy. So I signed the cheque and put it in the post. This is how long ago it was. A cheque. And put the cheque in the post, and I just plopped it in, because that was kind of like a life-changing moment at that point. And I thought, have I done the right thing there? Paused by the letterbox for about 5 seconds. Go, yeah, I have. So it's kind of like a nice kind of reaffirming moment there, where I just pause, think, is that right? Yeah, it is. And that was the start, really. So. That was in 2003, so my diploma was a year-long full-time down in Dorking. I was commuting from Swindon to my friend, who was very kindly put me up in Morden on the edge of London, and then I was commuting from Morden to Dorking, and I just absolutely loved it.
Awesome.
It was probably one of the happiest years of my life, I can honestly say that. Just met like-minded people, many of whom I'm still in touch with, and you just loved getting up in the morning, loved going in, loved studying, loved the struggle of not knowing things and learning a new subject.
Cool.
But you come out of that, a year-long diploma, and you sign up for these qualifications. I'm sure you've done the same, Nick. You think, I'll sign up for this qualification. I come to the end of it, I'll know everything I could possibly need to know about that subject. And then I came out, qualified, and I go, right, yeah. So I haven't really scratched the surface have I?
Yeah.
So then, finance meant I needed to set up pretty much straight away. My money was starting to run out. That's a good motivator, I find. So I just set up like I call it Swindon Sports Therapy, which is still going. I'm very proud of that. And effectively, it's like just doing sports massage, really, because that's what I knew. That's what I'd been taught to do. But I just started to delve deeper. I was always inquisitive, hugely inquisitive, and I was lucky in a way, I guess, in that. I was always very popular in our massage lessons to work with. I just seemed to have this ability to find things, you know, the knots in muscles, I guess, as it was at that time. And I took that into my newfound private practice that I just set up, and feedback was really encouraging, really positive. And I started seeing people and said, oh yeah, we've been to see orthopaedic surgeons, we've been to doctors, we've been to this, we've been to that, and they've not been able to help, and you've started to help. And I'm like, wow, that's lovely. Yeah. You know, in the first couple of years of practice, but so it's kind of what I needed at the time, to a bit of external validation. And you know, that was all really lovely. Lots of lovely clients, lots of challenging clients as well. You know, you don't really know how to deal. It's all very nice when it's going well. With more challenging clients who maybe challenge you a little bit more, that was a struggle. Certainly, I've always been kind of averse to conflict, but you know, you find a way. You just kind of, the more you sit with yourself and be comfortable and say, well, I kind of know what I know, or at least I believe in what I think I know, more realistically, and then kind of listen to what the person's saying and what do they need. Again, I didn't quite realise I was doing that at the time, but it's a case of I've always kind of respected what I do know and respected what I don't know. So in those kind of initial sort of year, 18 months, I had clients kind of steadily building up, and my idea was to just invest that time outside of that, obviously firstly building the business, but my priority was always to work on myself, to make myself the best therapist. I was kind of taking the clients on board. I'd speak to them on the phone before they came in, get a flavour of their condition, so I get my head in the textbooks, and try and understand more of what was going on. And I just felt there was still something missing. I was just doing basically sports massage at the time, which again is a fantastic discipline, and I still pull it out of the bag every now and then. In fact, I did some yesterday. In fact, so just on a little area that needed some work, and I got the impression you were talking about chiropractic work and osteopathy. I was lucky enough to do some of my work placement with an osteopath who now. Don't know, we've kind of lost touch, but last I heard he was working with the England football team. He's best mates with Frank Lampard. He's kind of osteopath to the celebs, in the football world at least. And so I knew there was this whole kind of joint thing that the sports massage thing kind of misses out. And and I thought as a sports therapist, we're not qualified or insured to what we call manipulate, and that's what in terms of old school, what I'd call chiropractic and osteopathy, what I call a whack and crack merchant. And most of us have had a little bit of experience of that. It's where they crack the bones, or so-called, back into place. It's not quite the truth as we understand it, but that's what it kind of feels like. And things, for the most part, normally feel great for a little bit afterwards. And I thought, okay, there's a bigger scope here. And I got a little, again, in the post, not an email, so it shows how long ago this was, from the head of our Society of Sports Therapists, Graham Smith, who was running these courses in joint mobilisation, which is a safer form, less violent, a lot gentler, and actually, in his opinion, more effective version of that manipulation that osteopaths and chiropractors are known for. Obviously, they do other things. I do appreciate this goes out to the public. I'm not going to put everyone in that pigeonhole, but that's the reputation that's out there in the general public.
The old school kind of
the old
school
crack stuff. So that kind of opened my eyes to the spinal mobilisation, joint mobilisation. Still me to this day, give me a joint, I'll mobilise it for you. Nice. As long as you know the theory underlying in terms of the plane of movement, then you can do a mobilisation. So then I started to add that with the the massage side of things. So I was trying to be really clever. So I was trying to be one of my things, over-intellectualising things. You're probably picking that up already. So I was trying to mobilise the spinal segment that made the muscle work, and then massage that muscle, having done the mobilisation. The idea being to get the nerve signal to that muscle as good as it can be, and then massage. And that seemed to work. It had some benefits. But then I still felt there was something missing. And then I went off and did some stuff by a group called the Neuro Orthopaedic Institute, and they're kind of world leaders in pain science.
Right.
And the two main guys are David Butler and Lorimer Moseley, and they do a lot of research into just what is pain exactly. And so this really opened my eyes to, again, as I mentioned previously, I was always into the psychology of situations, and in physiotherapy, sports therapy textbooks, they always talked about the psychological components of injury, but I never fully understood what that meant, or I couldn't feel what that meant. So that started to open my eyes a little bit further, and talking about definition of pain, how it's I think if I remember rightly, it's been a while since I've checked this definition, but it's a multi-input system that's basically congregated in the brain. So I think traditional therapies in their basic form are very much if I poke myself in the hand, I can feel that, and if I poke myself with a pin, that hurts. So the stimulus is very much coming into my hand. So human nature says, if I've got pain in my hand, it must be the hand that's the problem. And I think that's how a lot of therapies have evolved. Certainly traditional medicine. I just merged Western and medicine and came up with Wedicine.
Western medicine.
Yeah, I was quite pleased with that, actually. I'll use that. So certainly Western medicine has evolved that way, I think.
What one tool for one job sort of approach, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And you get hand specialists and knee specialists and things like that. And I think if you're an orthopaedic surgeon, that's absolutely valid because you're opening those specific areas up, and you need to have huge knowledge of those areas. But I think I'm always sceptical these days of anyone who is a knee specialist in terms of physiotherapy terms, because you're not looking at the bigger picture. You're not looking at the whole body, and certainly not looking at the whole person and what goes on in the mind. Absolutely, it's great to have specialist knowledge in what can go wrong very physically with the knee.
Yep.
But I think you need to juxtapose that against the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So that was all about the pain science, and started me on the psychology route. So then it was all about nerves as well. So I was kind of following the nerves from the spine all the way through the arms, the legs, kind of tracing them, kind of picking up tension in those nerves. Sometimes weirdly you can massage nerves gently, but it just kind of frees them up a little bit. And I thought, this is making sense now. I kind of got from top to bottom. I've got a whole line through the whole nervous system. But there were still people that I couldn't help. There were still people where, and I couldn't explain that. I'm like, well, this has worked for 3 people today, but it's just not working for this person. And what am I missing? What am I missing? And I happened to see an advert for some physiotherapy course by a guy called Douglas Heel. And Doug's, I know him very well now. He's can only be described as a maverick, a showman.
Yep.
Hugely intelligent, hugely well read. Certainly knows his own mind and doesn't mind speaking it. And we're going to get technical. So we talk about hip flexors. The test that I saw was a before and after test on hip flexor. And they did a test, and this person was very weak as he tested it. And they obviously didn't show you the technique, but they then showed you the test after, goes, ta-da, and it was 100 times stronger.
Right.
And that kind of got my interest, obviously. I'm like, well, that's clever. Because again, hip flexor is huge, as you probably know, Nick. It's a hugely important muscle. It lifts our leg up, quite important for just walking, running, all of these things. So I was, and previously sometimes I'd done the spinal mobilization to get the muscle working on a nerve basis, and sometimes that worked when you retest. And then sometimes I do that and it didn't work, and then I do a massage of the muscle as best you can with psoas, because it's a very, very deep muscle. And sometimes that would work, but then sometimes it wouldn't. I'm like, well, why has that worked previously and not this time? There's something I'm missing here. And the crux of, or that technique that Doug demonstrated, but his thing was much wider, was the connection of the hip flexor, the psoas, into the diaphragm. And then beyond. So I kind of went on that weekend-long course, looking for a new technique, and I came out of that course with a whole new approach.
Okay.
So his base premise is that the human body is trying to do two things. Breathe and run away from stuff. And if you can't do either of those, you're not going to last very long.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, it's about if that mechanism in terms of breathing and or being able to lift your leg up, effectively running away from stuff, isn't firing properly, your body will always find a way.
Right.
It will always find a way to do it. And those ways, from a lay perspective, we've just addressed as compensations.
Yeah.
They're compensations. And his view is that all compensations through the body stem from that. And this is where it starts getting emotional again. So this is where I really started getting into the emotional side of things. So in my work previously, you might get the occasional person breaking down in tears. When you work physically on the body, I think that's an inevitability. When people, I think now I can honestly say, when people open up physically, there will be an emotional opening up.
Yeah.
That was very, very infrequent in I'd say the first half of my sports therapy career. In the second half, that's increasingly frequent, just because there are certain muscles within the body that mean certain things.
Okay.
So if you consider the hip flexors, as we all know, to lift the leg up, if we consider their action from a different angle, they pull the torso downwards. And as soon as this doesn't work on radio or podcasts, as soon as I close my body off to the world, I adopt a certain posture. Mm-hmm. Immediately I start looking more nervous and more anxious, and I immediately look like I'm trying to cover my internal organs up.
Yeah.
So when we release these muscles up, and the diaphragm involved in breathing is one of these muscles, indirectly I'll say, because the diaphragm is very, very deep. But when we start to open this up, what can happen is we can open up the emotions as well. And as soon as I started getting into this work, it was kind of like opening the floodgates in terms of emotion.
Incredible.
So, yeah,
powerful stuff.
It really
and you've come from the physical and kind of entered the whole emotional psyche.
Yeah.
Unlocked it.
Opening a very, very large can of worms, I would say. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making people cry.
Yeah.
I can honestly say that. And what I mean by that is that I think the word privilege is overused at the moment, but it is a real honour for people to get to a point where people are comfortable enough with you, and it's all permission based. Mm-hmm. So if we unearth an area that is, if I start to see the tears coming, and you have to recognise that first, because some people will just say, Jamie, that's enough, I've had enough, and that's not a problem at all. But some people don't know, so you have to. This is one of the more advanced things of being a therapist. You have to read that before it happens, kind of thing. So if ever you feel someone's kind of going down that path, it's very much permission based. So it's kind of okay. I think you're getting a bit emotional there, and more often than not, I say, oh yeah, I am. I say, you're okay with it? Do you want me to stop, or you're okay for me to carry on? No, carry on. And the vast majority, we're talking 99% of people, particularly when it's permission based. When the emotion comes out, it's a huge physical and emotional release. So, there are people out there. There's theories that say actually, if you have that physical release, it can actually be more effective than tens of sessions of psychotherapy, for example.
Yeah.
I would never say that's exclusively the case, and I'd say in the last 16 years, and obviously certainly more in the second half of my career, I would actually say the emotional stuff comes out better with the people who've already done the hard work emotionally.
Okay.
So a nice easy way I like to put that is, our work, particularly in the emotional work that we do on a physical level, is great at catching your body up to where your head is at.
Right.
So if you've made progress emotionally, say for example, death is a good, nice cheery one to start with.
Yep.
But people die; it's a fact of life. So, say you lost someone 5 years ago. Okay, you'd have been horrible trauma there held within you. You'd have processed that grief over time. It takes time. It takes a long time. It's always going to be with you to a degree. But if, say we were 5 years down the line and you'd grieved well, and that's a concept that, it's only relatively new to me, the grieving well. But if you'd grieved well when life's moved on, you've made peace with the person that you've lost, we let go of that physical, that closing down, and all of a sudden you feel a lot freer off the back of just the physical work that we've done. If, say, for example, the flip side is that you haven't grieved well, and you've buried those emotions and you haven't dealt with them, you've just distracted yourself from them. Like, classic one in this day and age is keeping busy. Mm-hmm. Favourite one in Brighton is drinking or taking drugs. The home of hedonism, as I like to call Brighton. If you haven't, and you've distracted yourself with whatever your distraction is, food's another one, going on holiday all the time, travelling, seeking all these exciting experiences, adrenaline is another one. But if you haven't sat with those emotions and dealt with them, you're still at the same place you were when you lost that person in this example. Mm-hmm. So in those instances, 5 years down the line, we start to do the physical work, but we're not going to get the same release. So we've gone very advanced very quickly. I realize I've jumped out about 8 years of my career here. But in those instances, what does my role become is my question. And my role, I see, is to help that person physically as much as we can, alleviate their symptoms as best we can, open their eyes to the idea that what they're feeling physically could have an emotive source, discuss that with them as much as they are comfortable with, and then see what we think is the most appropriate way forward for them in discussion. My first port of call in this would be to, if it's something, again, we talked about death, that was a very extreme example. If it's just, something's not right at work, or I don't feel great, we kind of use our experience to nudge people in the right direction. Oh, have you tried reading this book, this self-help book, or have you tried this, or here's some advice, here's some breathing exercises to help with relaxation levels, get people on meditation, which is a bit buzzy at the moment, I know, but it is there for a reason, it works. And see if we can nudge people in the right direction. My next port of call is our good friend Alexander, which is how we met. Yep. Who's an exceptional life coach, and he calls this stuff deep coaching. So it's addressing the, I'd say, if you're the kind of person that always thought, well, maybe I need some psychotherapy or maybe I need counselling, but actually I don't sure my stuff is that serious enough, but I kind of need some help, Alexander's your man for that. Then you get stuff where there is an underlying issues. It's kind of, on the edge of some kind of condition. I mean, we can all be depressed and we can all be, anxious and all those kind of things. But I think when you get stuck in those states, and then those states escalate and move on to more serious conditions, I think that's when psychotherapy and counselling come in. And that's my next referral option from an emotional perspective. And then finally, thankfully I have a good friend who's a psychiatrist as well, a very, very well-known local psychiatrist, and I had my first ever referral the other week to him. He normally refers people to me when they're on their way back down in terms of getting better emotionally, and then we help them deal with their physical to then move them on to the next level emotionally as well. To
further unlock.
That's right, yeah, that's exactly it. And they're always lovely, lovely people to work with, because they're very grateful for where they've got to, but equally they want to kind of progress further emotionally and physically.
They're on a positive journey, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. So it was the first I saw a lovely lady who, I won't go into detail, but yes, she was having problems, and it was the right thing to do. And I'm really pleased that I did, because yes, the medication is really helping, and as a result of that, I'm now able to focus a little bit more on the physical things and help her with the physical, which then means she can be more active, which helps her with the emotional side, and then we then progress on to the next thing.
So many questions popping into my head. Fascinating. So we're effectively saying, to kind of recap, we're effectively saying that just through kind of muscle manipulation, joint manipulation, you're releasing emotional stress, which
absolutely
sounds kind of sounds quite groundbreaking. I mean, it makes sense to me. You know, coming from a clinical background and you know, a fitness background and coaching as well, and it's all linked. There isn't a knee problem. You know, you've got a problem. You've got an imbalance within your body that you need to rectify, but everything's involved. You know that. And that mind, heart, and body connection is absolutely connected, isn't it?
I've got a really nice example actually from a lovely gentleman I saw yesterday. I think it was our 4th session together. And he's not been able to straighten his knee for about 2 or 3 years, I think. And he's a big lad. He's an ex-rugby player. And first session we analysed things and actually traced it back to it's pain on the outside of his knee. I won't go into technical details. It doesn't really help over on a podcast. But outside of his knee. And I traced it back to an ankle injury that he had from playing rugby when he was 17. And he's now, I think he said he was 48, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So we chatted and he was very open during the session. And with during the sessions kind of emotionally, it's about judging what people are comfortable with opening up to, you know. I ask questions and I say you don't have to answer, or they just tell me stuff. A lot of people download straight away. That's the flip side. Some people don't want to download, and that's okay too. But what we actually find interestingly, as we open with the work physically, people actually talk a lot more as we're doing the work.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, because you know, my whole kind of the way that I coach and the way that I approach things is get people moving, get people doing things, and then have those conversations and start to break down the barriers, because I think we're so conditioned to a very poor way to learn or communicate. We sit down across a table and you know, tell me what the problems are. It feels very artificial. So I can only imagine that's the whole next level, isn't it? You're physically touching someone.
That's right.
You're manipulating their muscles. You're causing them release and pain kind of at the same time, pleasure, pain, then you're having a much deeper conversation. I can only imagine it opens very quickly. It's probably a very powerful way to communicate.
And I think trust is important as well, and some people I think are naturally more trusting than others. I think everything that's gone before in our lives affects our ability to trust people straight away. But it's how quickly that relationship develops, and I find the easiest way to engender people's trust is to show about my physical knowledge, or show off, if you like, you know, because they've come in with a physical problem, and if I can, it's not showing off at all, it's just kind of trying to just show people that you know your stuff and that they've come to the right place, and that you can engender that trust. Some people are open to the emotional side, you know, even before we've started treatment. One lady downloaded on me with all of her physical conditions. It took about 20 minutes without breathing and no pause, no full stops or no commas. And then she said, "And do you want the emotional stuff as well?" I said, "No, I'm all right for a moment. I'm just going to have a breather, and we can talk about the emotional stuff, you know, whilst I get my hands on it and get started." But to get back to the gentleman with the knee problem. And this is the fascination that I love about everything that I'm learning and continue to learn, is that we had a good first session. He saw some improvement. His face lit up. You know, he walked out much more comfortable than he came back in. Second session, we did probably about a week, 10 days later. In fact, it was my last session before Christmas, just before my wife went into labour with the birth of our second daughter. I remember it well. So we did that session, and he came back after Christmas. He said, "Yeah, Jamie, it's been much better. It lasted a couple of weeks, felt really good. You know, most mobile I've been for years." He said, "But then over Christmas, I regressed. I had an MRI scan due in the middle of January." And he had a confirmed lateral meniscus tear. So that's the spongy cartilage inside the outside of your knee, which would certainly explain some of the symptoms on the outside of your knee. I said, "Okay, that's interesting." But with my knowledge and experience now, the findings you get on MRI scans aren't the be-all and end-all. you can have, you might have seen this in your paramedic career, Nick, you can have these findings, but it's not, as we said with our pain conversation earlier, it's not necessarily the source of the pain. Now, this gentleman in question, I know he's going through separation from his partner at the moment. He was very open and very honest about me, and we had a really positive conversation about that as well, and I gave him a few ideas as to how he can deal with that and relax and work with that, really, work around it. You don't want to work around these emotions, you want to work with them, right? So he took everything on board that I'd said, and I said, well, and I looked at his body again, and there was a clear, he had, if you imagine, how can I say, genu valgus is what I want to say, but that's not going to mean anything to the listeners. It's where your thigh bone comes inwards and your shin bone goes outwards. Yeah. So if you imagine you've got a stretch force on the inside of your knee and a compressive force going through the outside of your knee. And
very common.
Yeah, really common, but only on this one side. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, well, yeah, but this has been around a long time. I don't think this is new. And you look at your body and says there's certainly a cause of that, potentially pinching on the cartilage, because particularly there wasn't any onset, there wasn't any sudden trauma. He wasn't still playing rugby, he hadn't rotated it, which is the standard way of damaging meniscus. So anyway, we've done another couple of sessions subsequently, and it just keeps continuing to get better and better and better every session we do. But this guy has a confirmed meniscal tear in the outside of his knee. Mm-hmm. So, these are the things. There's huge studies where they took thousands of people and MRI'd their entire body. The key thing with these people is they were asymptomatic. They didn't have any symptoms, mm-hmm. and they went through MRI and they went through and they put it in age groups. And it was I reference this on our website a lot. It's my favourite bit of research to reference. And it's something like age groups between 25 to 30, 30 to 35, and they went all the way through up to I think 80, 85 in categories. And the one I remember, I think, is by the time you're 75, I think something like 90% of people have a partial tear of their supraspinatus tendon. I will translate, by the way. So supraspinatus is a small muscle in your shoulder, a very, very important muscle. As soon as you see that on an MRI scan, you've got serious problems. But if you've got, say, 90% of 75-year-olds who aren't reporting symptoms in their shoulder, what does that mean? And for me, I think that the missing link here is the emotion. What's going on in that person's head, whether that's on a conscious level or subconscious level. Because again, in the work that we do, as people do open out, we talk about stress levels first up. Just in our, and it's very informal. Oh, how would you describe your stress levels at the moment? High, low, middling. And people say, no, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. Life's good. And then, and sometimes if people say, oh, any reasons for your stress? If they're open to it, we start going a little bit deeper at that point. Any particular reasons for your stress? And some people will say, and some people will say, oh, I'd rather not discuss. Most people do. Mm-hmm. But again, it's always important to give the people the option if they don't want to. And then even the ones, a classic one I remember from quite a few years ago was now a guy, oh yeah, I have high stress, but I thrive on stress. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go with that. Let's see where this goes. Yep. And sure enough, as we start doing the work, the physical work, I think his line was, oh, wasn't it one thing that's been bothering me. And that was through no prompting of my own.
Sounds familiar.
I wasn't digging, I promise. I was just doing the work for the physical work, and obviously he'd become more comfortable. We got to know each other during the session, and again, maybe the physical work as we were releasing, helped him kind of open up as well. You never know for sure.
Build that trust through touch, really.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I think there is a lot of that because we don't really touch each other much. I'd say Brighton generally is more huggy than most cities around the world. I've certainly become more huggy since I moved to Brighton from Swindon. So it's interesting, all my Brighton male friends, we all hug, and all my Swindon male friends, we all firm handshake.
Firm handshake.
Yeah, it's very different.
People in the States who listen to this go, what the hell are they talking about? There you go. I love it. it's really interesting, and it relates exactly to the work I've been doing with the health coaching. And it's interesting. You get people ringing you up, or you meet up with them, whatever it might be, and you have a sort of initial consultation, and they're like, "Oh no, everything's all right."
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, why are we having a conversation? That's kind of my very blunt mindset. But I was working with a guy before Christmas actually, and a really, really sort of sad situation in a lot of regards, because we'd worked together for probably 8 months, and we'd made huge progress. He was having some stress-related issues, psychological problems, and he's, he wanted, the classic came to me, he wanted to be fitter. Yeah. What does that mean? Okay, you've got to do the digging, you've got to pull at the thread, and I'm a big believer in that environmental kind of, get them in a space where it's just him and I, get him moving, get him maybe shifting some weight, moving in different ways, being a bit more animalistic as well. Yeah. And people change how they communicate, and the trust is built, and all those components that you mentioned. And he's doing so well. Came off some medication that he was on, and really progressing. And then he sort of upped his training, unbeknown to me, towards to doing more running and bits and pieces, and got more stressed at work in the lead up to Christmas. Yeah. And to the point where he went and saw a physio, and the outcome of that was his. No, I've no idea what that conversation was about, but I'm not pinning it on the physio at all. Actually, he started to get into a spiral mindset around it, and he said, "Look, I don't want to do any more fitness-related work because I think I'm just causing too much tension within my body."
Okay.
So in my eyes, that's completely opposing to how I felt that the work we were doing was going. Actually, I think we were making really real progress in getting him healthier holistically. And improving his mindset and actually de-stressing and releasing tension through the sessions. But it's funny how people think that these. And you get that even in clinical practice. You must see that. You get people, that have given... Firstly, you get the patient that wants a very specific diagnosis. Yes. I want to know what this problem on my knee is. That's all I want to know. Yeah. And then, I've seen it so many times, consultant-led practices or whatever it might be, the doctor relationship, and the doctor wants to appease that person or validate their own... standing status, whatever it might be, and they'll say, it's this exact thing, and you need to take this exact pill, and that's that's sort of poison to my ears in the way that I now think about this, the world, the body, and the world we live in, and how we interact with our environment, and segregating stuff up. And I think there's a lot of gaps in healthcare that reinforce that, and that whole doctor-patient relationship. It doesn't help. I don't think it's helpful. I think
the patient definition of patient is interesting, because I had a doctor ring up regarding this thing, and he wasn't very nice. I think it was my wife that took the call. She was answering the phones for the clinics at the time, before we had the children, and it was just regarding. We always call our clients because it's a two-way relationship. But the definition of patient is someone that you do something to.
Right. Interesting.
And the very definition there, I have issue with. Yeah. I completely understand and respect why in medical practice that has been the case, but I think because he insisted that we call the person patient. And my wife's quite feisty, so you wouldn't know. And she said, no, we call them clients. Yeah. Because it's private practice, and absolutely. But it's that relationship, isn't it? It's that journey. And again, from your guy you were talking about, those kinds of things are so frustrating, because you knew, or you could see based on your experience, what potential this guy had. Yep. And you probably had quite a clear idea in your head of where you hoped, or a good strong opinion of where you could get this guy to. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then external factors from what you were doing have come in. Yep. And just scuppered that. Yeah, basically. Absolutely, yeah. And I've probably got 10 examples like that, where those sort of junctures have happened, and we parted ways in a coaching relationship has ended effectively, or not begun actually, because I have people say, oh, I really want to do it, blah blah blah, I want to start on this date, and then
I'll get the inevitable text or email saying, "Oh, I'm unwell. I've had to go and see the doctor, and I don't want to do any fitness, quote unquote fitness stuff, because I don't want to. I don't think I'm ready for it." And in certain circumstances that might be absolutely valid, but I think a lot of circumstances it's not necessarily that valid, and it's
movement is the key to everything. I mean, I was actually coming full circle, actually finishing my story, so I'm a complete finish. So the one thing that I've just been researching more recently is the anatomy train stuff, which is kind of looking at how I was explaining to you before we went on air, Nick, was the the top of your eyebrow is continuous with the bottom of your foot in muscular and fascial terms. So the anatomy trains guys, they're a big believer. So for the people who don't know what fascia is, I know a lot of people do these days, but anyone listening who doesn't, effectively you have a layer of skin, you have a layer of fat, you have a layer of fascia, connective tissue, and then you have a layer of muscle. And the fascia is very structural. It kind of gives us Tensegrities. There you go. there you go, people. So Tensegrities is a term stolen from engineering, which is how things are constructed and how they maintain their strength. So biotensegrity, bio meaning human, so it's how the structure of the human is maintained, basically, and that's thought to be through the fascia. So, and the anatomy trains guys, and I'm a big advocate of their work and following, that's my latest voyage of discovery. Even though I've been following their work for 9 years, I'm just using their methodology a little bit more strictly these days. Is that the fascia contains a lot of that stress and a lot of that trauma within the system. I think the fascia work is amazing from a structural point of view. Whereas maybe something like sports massage or muscle activation, which is the Douglas Heel stuff I mentioned, is better for just kind of a pure pain kind of thing. But again, going back to the gentleman I spoke about with his knee was a funny angle. You can see how that worked to structurally realign someone to actually line them up on an area where we know we've got it confirmed on MRI where the cartilage is compromised in some way. But if you can do it to the point where you line him back up, and you've still got that compromised cartilage, but actually, you're taking the load off it, then you're going to see an improvement on that. And the nice thing with the fascia work, I think, is it seems to be long term as well, which is
you're developing the body, aren't you? You're not just it's not a sort of silver bullet approach, which never works,
No, we get the odd session where, and I think this comes back to movement, is that sometimes we change movement patterns, that's our thing, and I guess that's one of our things that we look to do rather than treating the symptom. And sometimes you just release someone and they get up and they come off the couch and they feel $1 million and they just get it. They go out and just go, wow, that's completely changed my world. You know what I mean? If they say they were concerned that, say, take another knee, for example, an arthritic knee, they'd had some mild form of arthritis diagnosed and they feared that was the source of their pain. If in my treatment somehow I've managed to change how that pain feels by potentially working their tummy, working their head, their neck, working their quadriceps, doesn't really matter, whatever we've achieved, that they come up and they feel that they can move better, I've actually changed their movement pattern there and then, and potentially they don't need any further work. I did that with one friend's mother, actually. She thinks I'm a genius, but
miracle work.
It does happen, but that person has to. You can take the person to the door, and they've got to walk through it. So, but again, before we get inundated with phone calls for treatments, they are the exceptions rather than the rules, And but I mean, if you're in the right place for it, that is absolutely possible. And I'm sure you've seen the case with your guys when, people who maybe some obese clients or. Maybe some people who've just been stuck at their desk for years and years. As soon as you get them to start moving, amazing things happen. Yeah. And coming back to the anatomy trains, those reason I started talking about this in the first place was we were talking about the human body is actually designed to walk rather than run, which is an interesting thing. If you think we were kind of scavengers and plain dwellers in our early years, a few thousand years ago. And we could rarely, even to this day, we could rarely outrun our prey. So the idea was that we spook the prey, and we say, oh yeah, they went that way, and we follow them, because we can sweat, and we have opposable thumbs. So we have that ability, whereas most animals can't sweat. So they're much quicker than we are, but we can always last longer.
Mm-hmm.
So you spook them again, they run off, and you walk after them. And so our whole body is actually designed to walk. And walking is, and this will come into your stuff again, Nick, walking is super important for the health of our internal organs. So there's a special bag on the hip flexor we were talking about previously, psoas, where the kidney is actually intrinsically attached to the psoas. So every time you draw your leg forwards to walk, you're effectively giving your kidney a massage. And that pumps the toxins out of the kidney, flushes things back in, helps with blood flow, obviously, but it's in our nature to move and walk. And when health degrades, it's usually due to a lack of movement.
Yeah. And you see that so quickly in sort of pre-hospital care. People are sort of bedbound, and their health declines incredibly rapidly. Yeah. If that makes actual.
Yeah, another really nice concept in a similar vein is I thought of our as a definition of our therapy work as spaceologists.
Right.
So there's a school of thought that says that any human disease is a loss of space, a loss of structure. So, say for example, if I, for the listeners, if I collapse down to my right side, that's putting more pressure through my right kidney,
mm-hmm.
for example.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, over months, years, what does that do to the function of my kidney? Probably not great. We don't know. But it's
some
a really
sort of restriction in blood flow,
yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah,
even on a small level. Yeah.
Again, there's some lovely stuff out there by some of the more alternative guys. A guy called Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief is his seminal work. Really, really interesting stuff. And it's basically saying that what our beliefs are change our physiology. And there's some amazing research done with cancer patients who, I can't name the studies, but basically people who have their chemotherapy, if they visualize their chemotherapy as almost like a Pac-Man munching away at their cancer cells, mm-hmm. then they fare better than the people who don't do that.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in that. I really am in the sort of power of the mind, and I think it's very easy to discount it as not hard science, and I think we're caught in a bit of a kind of dichotomy at the moment around that, and what do we believe, what don't we?
Yeah, I think there's better stuff coming out all the time. I think as two guys who've seen what we've seen and believe what we believe, we have to be really careful of. We're always, a good friend of mine, a psychiatric nurse, said we're always looking for evidence that support what we already believe.
Yeah,
so it's that
how the brain works.
Yeah, kind of confirmation bias. But then equally, if we didn't do that, we wouldn't do any research. So, but it's trying to challenge yourself, I think. So when I'm writing many blog posts, I find the pieces that I want to emphasise the point that I want to make, back that up with some research. But then I'll try and research or search for, from the other side, research to, dispel, what my beliefs are, just to challenge myself as well.
Yeah, I think it's a healthy balance of both, isn't it? And you're right, we do, there is obviously a massive cognitive bias, and that's well documented. Matthew Syed talks about it a lot in his sort of recent work, Black Box Thinking, and sort of, I've read some work by Nassim Taleb, who again is all about sort of this cognitive bias and cognitive dissidence, but I don't think you can discount the kind of the mindset approach and the belief system and the research that's been done around that space, and it's intrinsic to Eastern medicine, and that's why I think there's huge value in it, because and I was going to mention before, you were saying about we were talking about the doctor-patient relationship, and how I believe that's very broken in this Western culture that we've got, and you go back to the tribal Eastern cultures, and you got paid as the medicine man when people were well. You didn't get compensated when people were unwell. Yeah. And you juxtapose that with what's going on in our current healthcare system, big pharma, and it's just there's some classic, obvious kind of.
Yeah, I think the whole, the whole NHS thing at the moment is, everyone's. I know if we've got any NHS employees working, we see a lot of NHS employees with us completely burnt out in every possible way, and they're all trying to do their best. But I think the challenge there is what it's become in the UK is, and this is not for everyone. I don't mean this, but we all need to take accountability for our health, and look at that holistic. What are we doing? What are we doing with our stress levels? What are we doing with our nutrition? What are we doing with our physicality? Are we all doing the right things? And if we are doing the right things, and we still have a medical condition, absolutely, the NHS is there to catch those genetic. I'm diabetic myself, so I've got one of those myself. Been there, got the T-shirt kind of thing. So there's a genetic predisposition to that. Actually, it was a very stressful time in my life when it came on. So even though I had the genetic marker, I got to the age of 33 without it being triggered, and then a stressful event, I suspect, triggered it. So there's massive overlap between all of those things. But I think accountability is key, and I think myself included, you can always be doing more, and you don't want to get too puritanical or too perfectionist about this, but I think the more people we can reach, and the more people educate to look after themselves, but not only look after themselves, but understand the reason. Rather than just telling them look after yourself, is understanding the reasons and what benefits that might have. The obvious one from eat better because you don't want to get fat, that has health implications, but I don't think that's fully understood how far-reaching those health implications are. Same with stress levels. As we said, I think stress levels, it's a huge link with cancer and everything like that. There's theories abound again on the kind of the Bruce Lipton scale of things, where if your stress levels increase, we stay in our fight or flight. We don't take in that oxygen enough. That drops the pH of our blood. Below a certain level of pH in our blood, that changes our immune function, and that immune function is the immune function that normally will gobble up those cancer cells, because cell mutation is a normal part of living. Mm-hmm. It's only when your body loses the ability to gobble up those cell mutations that then cancers develop. And again, I'm not talking about the rare strains where the very aggressive types, or maybe I don't know. I've reached the end of my knowledge at that point, but it's fascinating to have that discussion. And
my belief from my experience, first-hand experience only, and the science I've read as well, but mainly from my first-hand experience is stress is the biggest killer. Yeah. No two ways about it. And I've heard time and time again in clinical practice, patients say, oh, it's not a heart attack, then it's just stress. Yeah. And my response is, stress is the biggest killer. You need to sort this out. Okay, you might not need A&E this minute, but you need to sort your life out. Otherwise, next time.
I think we live in a busy world, and there are a lot of external pressures on us. Coming back to Alexander, our good friend, for part of his work, it's all a choice.
It is. I want to spend the last couple of minutes, I'm just cognizant of time now. I want to spend the last couple of minutes kind of going in a few sort of general tools and tactics, and some sort of more quick fire questions as well. No we've covered so much, and it's great. It's really fantastic to dive into your knowledge and your expertise and kind of unpick kind of where you're going in your thought process. For me, it's fascinating. I love it, and I certainly hope we can pick this up again. Round two. But so I think so. From your experience, where do you see the classic manifestations of stress?
So that would be within the stomach, I would say. So the hip flexors, the main hip flexors, psoas, run right next to the spine. If you imagine, I'm doing my radio thing again, my hands are going either side of my belly button here, so kind of a couple of inches below, and then they run kind of down and then onto the femur, which is how it affects the hip flexion, so lifting your leg up. That's continuous with diaphragm, and that's the areas where we see the most emotional kind of breakdown, I guess, in people, and also the most dramatic improvement in function. So, we regularly see improvements in people's neck range of movement by releasing off the tummy. We regularly see improvements in their knee condition, in their plantar fascia, in their foot, by releasing off their tummy. It's not the answer to absolutely everything. It's a really good place to start.
Why does it manifest there, do you think?
I think, as we were just talking earlier, I think it's there's some lovely stuff where computers can now read our emotions, because every emotion has a physical, I think this was on a facial perspective, has a facial impression, and computers, when they go down to a detail, can read what that emotion is if they're told, given some experience. And I think it's the same posturally. Every emotion has a postural representation, and that's different from person to person. But when I meet people for the first time, I can, as soon as I go out into reception, I've got an idea of how that session's going to go and which way it needs to go, just by reading the person's body language. When you've treated about 3,000 people over 16 years, you do it instinctively without even thinking about it. But you can going to freak the listeners out, but you can kind of read people's minds by just looking at how they hold themselves.
Of course, and that's been researched as well, hasn't it? But it's interesting to say about the stomach, because we've always got that analogy that we feel it in the gut, don't you?
Yeah, gut feel. That's a good thing.
Feel, yeah.
I think, but it's equally, it depends on your evolution side thing, but we made a big mistake standing up, just to expose all our internal organs. But again, when we feel vulnerable, that we want to close that off, and we want to protect that from the outside world. So, there's a physical and emotional overlap, as we've been talking about for the whole of the last hour or so.
And very, very difficult to do. But if you were going to generalise some things that the general public should be doing, to help them be healthier and not allow that stress to manifest, what would you pick as your kind of one or two?
Okay, firstly, I'd say, come back to Alexander, how we met personal development. I think that's key. We've all got stuff. Everything that's gone before has made us who we are. And unless there's any listeners out there who's had the perfect life, then I suggest we all look to understand ourselves better. I think that's really important, whether that's from an emotional or a physical perspective. I think for me, emotion and physical, you can merge and blend into one because they are the same thing. From a specific thing, we're big believers in relaxation breathing as a really nice way in to effectively, to simplify the discussion we've been having today. The more stressed you are, the more pain you feel. Again, we've gone into quite a bit of detail. I could go into more detail, but we lose everyone we've still got. Yep. So it's as simple as that. We look at stress as a volume button on people's pain. It's a really nice, simple analogy. Yep. So if you can do the work to reduce your stress, or some simple breathing relaxation exercises for diaphragmatic breathing, I think is the simplest thing people can be doing to bring those levels down. In extreme cases, people are so stuck in their fight or flight that they find relaxation breathing terrifying. I would say there's probably about 1 in 50 people that come through our doors. But just in case there's a listener who is that, if you don't feel comfortable with your breathing, that's okay. But again, it's something I would recommend you work up to gradually. Most of us can lie down. It's about a case of getting into that diaphragm to do the relaxation breathing, rather than being stuck in our rib breathing, which is that fight or flight response, and increased stress levels.
Good advice, and I think it echoes everything that I've been saying on my sort of
lovely.
my side of things as well. Yeah, and just to finish off with, then I ask all my guests the same question, if I remember. Today I have. So what does health mean to you? What's your definition of health?
I think the word that just immediately sprung to my mind, and we'll go with gut feel, so that's what we were talking about just a second ago, was accountability. Taking account of your own health, whether that's physical, emotional, mental, whatever brand you want to put on it. take account for your own health, because you can always do something. Some of the most beautiful work I've done has been with people well into their 80s. The changes you can see, and when you've seen people, octogenarians kind of, I wouldn't say they leap out off the couch or they, sprint. Yeah, you've got octogenarians to ditch their walking stick, things like that. But when they're open to it, when their desire is still there to change something, if you don't like something about your life, there's only one person who can change that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's you. And there's a very gruff Australian physio that I follow some of his work. He describes more of a marketing kind of thing. He describes it as the fish stinks from the head down.
An apt point to pause and reflect at the end of our
finishing.
Yeah, sentence. Absolutely brilliant. Jamie, I just wanted to thank you very much for coming on the show. Where can people find out about you and a bit more and get in contact?
Yeah, sure. Probably the best bet is our website here in Brighton, brightonsportstherapy.co.uk. Similar one in Swindon, swindonsportstherapy.co.uk. Loads of information. We try and change the world with everything that we've got on our website as well. So obviously it's a vehicle for our people to find us from a marketing perspective. But if people are listening in the States or anywhere else in the world who aren't nowhere near Swindon or Brighton, please check out our blog. There's loads of stuff on breathing, on anxiety, the physical ramifications of anxiety, some more technical pieces about a whole host of physical conditions. So just in trying to improve the world, go for your life, enjoy it.
Awesome.
I've put a lot of effort into it.
Excellent. And let's try and book in a second conversation to dive a bit deeper in some of these and develop what we've been talking about as well. That'd be fantastic. Awesome. Thank you very much, Jamie.
No problem. Pleasure, Nick.
How was that for you guys? I really hope you enjoyed that episode, and I hope that every week you are tuning in and starting to understand a little bit more about your journey in well-being and health and what health means to you, because it is different for all of us. And I think this episode highlights that. It highlights kind of how things manifest differently in different people, and injuries and stresses and all that sort of stuff. So once again, it's a real privilege to kind of be tuning into your ears and bringing you this content and these messages and my messages and the guys that I bring on their messages as well, which 100% of the time is coherent and aligned with what I want to put out in the world, and the messages and the movements that I think are absolutely vital to help shift the needle, because there are massive problems within the healthcare system. Doesn't matter if you're in the States, you're in Australia, or here in the UK. We're all facing huge challenges, and we need more of this stuff. We need more people kind of understanding what needs to happen, generally and specifically as well, with the expertise like Jamie and like yourself, as being active participant in your own health and own well-being and changing that trajectory. That's what I'm all about. Guys, if you want to engage with me, or you're interested in some coaching and you need some help with some challenges you are facing, you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Instagram. It's at The Knock, that's THENOQ. Also, you can comment and give me feedback on the episode in those places. You can also check me out at elementalhealth.co. That's my website if you want to talk more about coaching. Guys, I will be back very, very soon with another episode. It's been a pleasure. Subscribe, like, but most importantly, share it with someone you think would find value from this episode. Cheers. Take care.